of Safer Streets, LA. Former filmmaker Jay Beeber is best known for campaigning to remove the cameras, which he argued unfairly penalized drivers while doing little to improve safety. Los Angeles city officials voted to kill the program 3 years ago after a backlash over patchy enforcement of the fines. More recently, Beeber has tackled parking tickets, arguing that the city leans too heavily on drivers to balance its budget. He and his Los Angeles Parking Freedom Initiative co founder Steve Vincent recently teamed up with the mayor's office to brainstorm reforms to the parking system. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Jay Beeber.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here today. And my name is Jay Beeber. I am the Executive Director of Safer Streets LA. I am the guy that got rid of the red light cameras here in Los Angeles. And I will want to chat with you today about how I did that and how you can do similar things in your cities. So first, as a background, just to give you an idea, a lot of people ask me, how did I get into that? Why did I start doing that? And what happened was I had seen a report on the news. It was one of those investigative reports here in Los Angeles that talked about how the red light cameras here were making the intersections less safe, that it was causing more accidents, not less accidents. And so that got me thinking, and I was just curious about it. And then the police department came back and claimed that the report was wrong and that the intersections were actually safer due to the red light cameras. So being a sort of science-based person, I said, well, you know, they both can't be right. And I started looking into it myself. And then I started contacting the people at City Hall, the different staff members and the different council members, and started telling them about that. But before I did that, I watched what the other side was talking about. And I framed the message that I was going to give when I started talking about this particular issue. And I never decided ahead of time, hey, I'm going to be a big activist and become like the leading anti-red light camera person in the country. It was just one of those things where I saw that they weren't getting the right information, so I decided that I was going to just try to give them some good information. And not knowing anything about city government, politics, or any of that sort of thing, I just said, hey, I'm going to contact some people and I'm just going to let them know what I know, and you know, they're going to change their minds. And that was the plan. And so what I did was I watched what the other side was saying when they were promoting the cameras. And so I had a couple of choices as far as what my message was going to be. I could have given the message that the red light cameras were unfair and that the tickets were too high. And that was part of the message, but that wasn't the main message. Or I could have given the message that the cameras were unconstitutional. That's what a lot of people were arguing. Or that they were just a money grab. But I realized that if I was going to be successful, giving the argument that, hey, it's unfair, nobody in city government, for the most part, was going to really care about this sort of thing. And at the time, the narrative was that the city was making a lot of money on these cameras. So when I looked at what the other side was saying, they were talking about every single time they were asked a question about the program, whether it was a news conference or whether it was when they were testifying at city council meetings, they would always start their remarks with, this is a safety program. And so what happened was I started doing research and I found that you can actually make the intersections a lot more safe by doing the engineering properly than by ticketing a lot of people. So that became my message, and that became the name of my organization, which was Safer Streets LA, to give them the message that our streets can be safer if we get rid of the red light cameras and we do the intersection engineering properly. So I became something of an expert on the science behind red light running and the science behind making the intersection safer, and I started giving them the information. So then the question is, well, who do you contact and who do you talk to? And here in Los Angeles, it's a city government where we have a mayor, but we have a weak mayor and a strong city council system. So this 15 city council members are what runs the city, although in conjunction with the mayor, but the mayor isn't the beginning and end of everything like, say, the president of the United States is. Here in Los Angeles, the 15 members of the city council really are what made the decisions, and those were the people that I initially targeted. So what I did was I simply found out as I watched the feed from my computer feed on the city council meetings, what I did was I looked to see who in the city council seemed to be a little bit skeptical about the program. Now, everybody had voted for the program. Everybody was in favor of the program for the most part. But there were people that had certain questions about it. They seemed skeptical. And so those were the people that I started contacting first. And all I did was I called up their offices, and I didn't know who to ask for, but I just asked, said, hey, I was watching the city council meeting, and it was a discussion about the red light cameras, and I have some information that I'd like to share with you. And what they did was they put me in touch with the staff person that would handle transportation. In Los Angeles, a lot of the way it's broken down is that there are people who help the city council members. They're called legislative aides here, but there's different names in different cities. And so they put me in touch with the staff members who I would then talk to, and then I would give them information, and I would start off. And one of the things that I made very sure of when I first started out is that I was going to be non-confrontational. That was my message. And if there are different ways about being an activist, different ways about changing things, but I found that if I just got in touch with them and said I wanted to be helpful to them, that they were going to be much more open to listening to me and listening to what I have to say, rather than go in there and say, you guys are doing all this wrong and I want to stop you from doing this. I figured that would they would put up a roadblock to me and nobody was going to listen to anything I had to say. So that was sort of the approach that I took when I started this out. I'm just going to go through a couple of things that you should know ahead of time if you want to make changes in your own city for a particular policy. The first thing is that you should know that the system is designed to wear you down and that they hope that you're going to go away. And that's because that's usually what happens with most people who want to contact them and complain about something. Because usually what happens is somebody contacts them, they make a phone call, they write an email or whatever, and they complain about something, and maybe they'll complain about it twice, but then at some point they go away. And that's what the system is counting on. The system is counting on that you are going to get tired and you're going to go away. They're there. They're getting paid for it. They have all the time in the world, and you have a life to lead, and they expect you're going to go away. And what they were surprised about was I never went away. I just kept coming back. And I was this guy that I just kept coming back. And again, not as a pain in the neck, but just said, hey, I have this more information. I have this other piece of information. Oh, you had a city council meeting and the police department said this, or the Department of Transportation said that. Let me give you the right information. Let me give you some more information that they didn't give you. And so I sort of became known as the person that was helping them do their jobs. And so the first thing is that the system is designed to wear you down. The second thing you should know is that likely it's not going to be easy. Know that it's not going to be fast. So think of it more as a marathon. If you have a big policy that you want to change, the city of Los Angeles had been running the red light camera program for a number of years. It was about a decade at the time that I started getting involved. So this was a program that they had been running for a long time. A lot of people are on record for saying that they liked the program and that they thought it was a good idea. And I also realized that the other side, which is the police department, I was never going to convince them. They were never going to come back and go, oh, right, Jay Beeber's right. We're wrong. We've been wrong for 10 years. They were never going to do that. So I had to try to look for people that weren't invested in this program as much as other people. The other thing is, so it's not going to be fast. So think of it as a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's likely going to be a marathon for you. And the other thing you want to know is that you need to be the expert on that subject. You need to know more about that subject than anybody else in the city, anywhere. Or if you have experts that you can work with and you can bring in for you, that they're the experts, then you want to have be the person that knows more about that issue than anything else. The other thing is you need to look ahead of time at who you need to work with. Now, again, in Los Angeles, it was city council members, and then there were the city council staff. So here we have people on staff that were the legislative deputies, and the city council also they have field deputies. So I found that the people that I needed to work with were the legislative deputies, not the field deputies, because the legislative deputies were the ones that helped make policy. So find out who staffs who on what and get that information before you go and talk to somebody for a really long time and find out they weren't the right person to talk to. There's also in the city council here in Los Angeles that there are committees that each of the council members are sit on, and some of them are chairs of those committees, and find out if there's a different staff person that maybe chairs them on this particular issue. If there's a committee for that, and find out that maybe a different person if they're on that particular committee. So, for example, in Los Angeles, it was the Transportation Committee, which was going to make a lot of these decisions. And so for the council members who were on the Transportation Committee, I had to find out a different staff member that staffed them on that particular committee as opposed to transportation in general. The other people that you may need to work with in the city are department staff. And so we had the Department of Transportation, we had the Police Department, we had a number of other departments here in the city. And those departments are going to sometimes feed in the information to the city council. And the way that I found out that it worked was that the Department of Transportation and the police department would go before the city council and they would give their message, and there would be no chance of anybody else giving another message. And so I became the guy who was going to do that. And I also realized that all of the work that was being done on these issues, just like a lobbyist, is you do the work ahead of time. Before it comes up in city council, before it comes up in a committee, you want to have contacted people, made contacts, made friends, and have contacted them way ahead of the time that it actually comes before the city council. Because usually by the time it comes up in a public debate, most of the decisions are already made. So understand that there are other city entities. Here again in Los Angeles, it was the mayor's office. There was the chief legislative analyst, there was the city administrative officer, there was the city attorney, and the city controller. And all of these organizations and people were important aspects of who was going to give information for the for this program. And I talked to all of their staffs and tried to give them the message that that I wanted them to have. So what really changed the game for me was I found the weak link in the system. And here in Los Angeles, there is an organization called the Police Commission. And the Police Commission was set up during, for many, many years, but it became very, very powerful and was given a lot of autonomy. It was a civilian board. It's not a part of the police department. They're a civilian 5-member oversight committee. They are politically appointed, so they're not elected. And they were set up and made very, very powerful during 2 big scandals here, the Rodney King beating and also the Rampart scandal. So if anybody knows about that. So what happened was I found out that the Police Commission was an organization that the police department couldn't do anything unless the Police Commission approved it. So this red light camera program that had been running for a long time, it was under the police department, that if the police commission said, no, you can't do this anymore, they wouldn't be able to do that. And so I actually just called up one of the members of the police commission and I just started talking to him on the phone. And again, because it was the police commission, I started talking to them, not, hey, the police department is bad or hey, the police department is lying. It was one of these things where I said, you know what, I have some information about this program. I saw what you said. I really liked what you said. But I have some additional information, some things you may not know. And that was the approach that I took. Know that there's other resources that you can bring to your disposal. And a lot of those are things that you may not think about ahead of time. So there's probably parts of the city website where you can find out who these people are. You can find out who the city council members are. You can find out when they're having their meetings. For the city of Los Angeles, they give the agendas ahead of time. But one thing I can't stress more than enough is that if this is an issue that's going to come before the city council and you know it's going to come in the future, try to get into the game and start talking to people as early as possible. For the red light camera program here in Los Angeles, I knew that I had about a year window because they had extended the contract and they were going to look for a new contract, and that was going to take about a year. And it was during that year window in which I was able to do all my work. So by the time they came to the point of deciding whether they were going to have a new contract, I had convinced everybody that this program was no longer beneficial to the city. It also came out that the city was losing over $1 million a year, and that helped as well. But I think the most important thing, and I say this sometimes as a joke, but it really is true, being somebody who doesn't give up and somebody who just keeps going and, again, is not confrontational, but is somebody who simply is out there, just wants to help, is all very helpful, but it always helps to be right. And if you give them information that's not true, if you give them information which they can find out later that you weren't telling them the truth, you are going to lose credibility and you will not get very far. They will turn you off and they will not listen to you anymore. So make sure that everything that you say, you can back up and be definitive on. That doesn't mean that there aren't some things where, it's opinion this or opinion that, but the more that you can back up everything that you say, don't go off half-cocked, and make sure that you can back up what you're saying, because there's nothing worse than being shown to be a liar or to be completely wrong about something. So what happened with the police commission is that there was a 5-member board. They were 100% in favor of the red light camera program in December of 2010. By April of 2011, I had convinced all of them to switch their positions and to be opposed to the program. And again, I did it one person at a time. So I see that we're running to the point where we want to start getting questions. So the thing that I want to do is to kind of sum up is to say that you want to look for the weak links in the system, and you want to make sure that you're the expert on everything, and you want to do what the lobbyists do. So as an individual, you can still use the same tactics as a lobbyist use. And I call myself now the people's lobbyist, because I go around and I make a lot of change about things that really affect people's lives, like parking and a number of other issues here in the city. And I do that because I'm speaking for the people. So it helps that I'm not being paid to do this, although it would be nice to be able to figure out how to monetize it at some point. But a paid lobbyist is possibly going to be looked at less favorably than a citizen lobbyist, but use the same tactics, which means that you want to make relationships with people and get to know people and become friendly with them. You don't have to be their best friend, but you want to change, you want to have that relationship so they don't look at you as just some strange person that's calling them. If you talk to them over time, they get to know you, and they will start listening to you, especially if you're a reasonable person. And it looks like we probably should start taking questions. Yeah.
Matt.
You're up. Go ahead.
Great presentation, Jay. I appreciate that. And as a former LA resident, I totally understand what you're talking about when it comes to saving people money in the parking world, because that with all the cars and traffic out there, it is certainly a major impact in the wallet of people in parking, no doubt about it. Some questions for you that have been put out by our viewers. First question is, big cities often seem like insurmountable obstacles for activists. How do you prepare to change the minds of people who basically run small countries, as an analogy?
Yeah, well, I think that the part of the strategy is have a message that's helpful and not confrontational. I think that there is definitely a place for being confrontational. With the parking situation here in Los Angeles, I did have to be on the radio, and I did have to and build up a lot of public support for them to change things. But if you can start out as being helpful and just start talking to them, it may seem insurmountable. I mean, when I started this process, I didn't know who any of these people are. They just seemed like a bunch of people who were unreachable. But amazingly enough, I just called people on the phone, and all I had to do was, I mean, obviously, sometimes you have to talk to their staffs, but I now do this at the state level. I lobby people at the state level. Seems even bigger than at the city level. But I just start calling their offices, and I just talk to them and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody about this issue. Who's the right person to talk to about that? And now I'm known as the person who is the expert on this issue. For example, last week I was flown up to Sacramento to testify on a bill. A senator had a bill to get rid of stop sign cameras in a park system here in Los Angeles, and that state senator asked for my help, and they flew me up there to testify in support of their bill because I was their quote-unquote expert.
Wonderful. What part did the issue itself, red light cameras, play into how well your strategy worked?
Well, first of all, it didn't. I'm getting some feedback here. It didn't hurt that it was a hated program. That was definitely something that was very helpful because everybody knew it, and of course that helped as far as the media was concerned. The media loved this story. It was actually in 2011 the biggest story, I was told, by one of the major newspapers here in the city of Los Angeles, and it became a really big story across the entire country. But it was a hated program, and people really despised the red light camera program. There were here in California, when you get a red light camera ticket, and a lot of people who aren't from this area are going to be shocked by this, the ticket was about $500. So that helped because people felt I was able to frame this in a lot of different ways. I was able to frame it in terms of the safety argument, but I was also able to frame it in the, hey, we're really hurting poor people. One of the things that I would argue to people was that these violations, most of them were a fraction of a second violations, like less than the blink of an eye, or they were what's called a rolling right turn, which means that you just don't stop before you make the right turn on red. And the fact that I was able to kind of cast this program as, hey, it's not making the intersection safer. There's things you can do that make it safer, but also the city's losing over $1 million a year. And it's really, really hurting people. It's hurting the poorest among us. I would say, this $500 ticket for some people can be the difference between putting food on their table or paying their rent. And again, that hit a lot of people in an emotional way because it was one of those things that I could make it from a science standpoint, but I also make it as an emotional argument as well.
All right, next question for you. You called your organization Safer Streets LA. Why didn't you call it something like LA Against Red Light Cameras or something? Was there forethought behind the name and the branding?
Yes, that was definitely something that I thought of. And again, it came right from the when I looked at what the other side was talking about, they would frame this as a safety argument. And I knew that if you talk to public officials, if it's an issue of safety, they're always going to claim that, hey, I don't care how many people we're ticketing. I don't care if the tickets are $500. This is a safety issue. So we're going to continue this program because it's a safety issue and safety trumps all else. And a lot of times we heard in city council, well, if we could just save one life, then no matter what else happens with this program, then it's worth it. So what I did was when I named the organization, and the only reason I created an organization and made a name was because I wanted a website and I wanted a place for people to go to in order to look up information and send people to the information that I had for them. So I said, what am I going to name this organization? And I did think long and hard about it. And I said, you know what? If they have a safety program, I have a better safety program. And that was how I framed the name of the organization, which was Safer Streets LA. I could have gone with, the I Hate Red Light Cameras, and a lot of red light camera organizations are the anti-red light camera this or whatever. But for me, to be a positive thing as opposed to an anti thing, what I felt was going to make me much more successful. So that's why I named it Safer Streets LA. Our streets can be safer if we do the engineering properly. And I knew that if you do the engineering that you cut down on the number of tickets, and eventually the program would go away on its own if I could get them to make the engineering changes. As it was, I was able to make the political argument as well, and so they didn't want to spend the money on the program. And again, most people were clamoring for getting rid of the program.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jay Beeber. We appreciate you coming on to the ACTCON conference and sharing with your experience and your expertise. And also want to congratulate you on your successes and as you continue the good fight in the issues that you are dealing with. Thank you so much, JB.
Yeah, and if I can, just to sum up, if people want to get in touch with me, my website is saferstreetsla.org, and you can reach me. It's just my first name, JAY, at saferstreetsla.org.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the conference.